Hi, this is my case study reflection for EDL 851. In this case study, it's focused in a school. It's a small school in a rural school district where there's a low amount of turnover. It mentioned that the team had been together for about 8 years. The new principal, Miss Wilson, has been principal for about 2.5 years. The parents seem very satisfied, the test scores are above average, and they have good student attendance. Moving on to Category 1, we will analyze and identify the problem. What we know in this situation is that Mrs. Horton is a veteran first grade teacher. There have been some noticeable changes after spring break, 2.5 years into the new principal's principalship. Her team members mentioned that Miss Horton is going through a divorce and she's now a single parent of 2 teenage boys. Those noticeable changes include the fact that Miss Horton is short-tempered and argumentative, doesn't seem to have the same work ethic, and she's often late to work each week. At the beginning of the school year, they were talking about a new reading program that the school was adopting, and Mrs. Horton was really negative and kind of gave the people who supported the program a hard time. So the principal did meet with Mrs. Horton one-on-one. There were parent complaints starting actually 6 weeks into school. There were phone calls and letters from parents. They were upset about how Mrs. Horton was allegedly treating the students in the classroom. They said that she'd been verbally abusive, screaming at kids for mistakes. Some kids didn't want to come to school. They were upset. And the principal went in to conduct some observations and didn't see any evidence of the parent complaints. The superintendent also reported that parents had made contact with the board members to complain about Mrs. Horton's behavior, and that parents were saying that they wanted students reassigned. Another thing that I thought was interesting was that Mrs. Horton refused to hold parent-teacher conferences. Just refused, didn't do it. The last straw in this scenario is a meeting with a student in her class, Julia. Her dad came in to talk to Mrs. Horton, and Mrs. Horton had a terrible reaction during that meeting. It did not go well at all. In that meeting, Mrs. Horton was very unprepared, which irritated Mr. Stafford even more. And at one point, she just went off on him, which did not help the situation. What we need to know more about the situation is I'm curious if there were consequences for her not holding parent-teacher conferences. In my mind, that's a professional duty that all teachers are expected to uphold. I also am curious if she's been informed throughout the year about the different parent complaints that have been made about her and what the consequences have been or the expectations have been from that. Has the principal set expectations for parent communication? How did the principal prep Mrs. Horton for the meeting with Julia's father? Was it just, hey, we're meeting? Or did they go into depth and kind of have a plan of how to address the concern? I'm also curious how many families have been affected by, how many parents basically are complaining. Is it one family who's doing submitting multiple complaints? Is it one bad day? Or is it lots of different families who are contacting the school and the board? I'm also curious if there are teacher aides that are available to help out in Mrs. Horton's classroom. The problem is kind of twofold. The first one is the fact that we have a teacher who has some serious personal issues, and unfortunately it's interfering with her work. And the immediate problem is we have an irate parent who wants his child reassigned. I have a few actions I propose to help resolve this issue. The first thing is we need to find coverage for Mrs. Horton's classroom. After that meeting with the parent, she should not go in and try to teach kids. She needs to cool down. We need to make sure everyone's safe and calm before we start our school day. The second thing I would want to do is confer with the superintendent for guidance on reassigning Julia. Because if multiple parents are complaining about Mrs. Horton, I'm afraid if we reassign one student, lots of students the parents are going to want their students reassigned too. So I really need to confer with my superintendent for guidance. I also need to gather documentation about all the issues that have been happening with Mrs. Horton because I feel like it's time to pull in human resources and find out what action steps can be taken. To me, it seems like she needs to go on a plan of improvement immediately. There also need to be some disciplinary actions against her with the issue. Like, I just saw this outburst with a parent, and it is absolutely unprofessional. Several things need to happen to promote the success of all students in this case. I feel like it would be appropriate for the principal to meet with the students, not to interrogate them or try to find out what's going on in the classroom, but just to kind of touch base and make sure everything's going okay. And some things the students might share things naturally. But again, I'm not necessarily investigating the situation with my 6-year-old students, but I just want them to make sure that if they do have anything that they'd like to report, they can. Otherwise, just touching base with them. I also feel like I need to meet with parents too and be very open to meeting with parents. I know that you don't always want to get in between teachers and parents. The parents should always go to the teachers first, but in this case, it's a different situation. So the parents need to know to come to me with their concerns. I want an increased counselor presence where the counselor can work with the teacher to kind of build a more positive community. I mean, I would want special lessons, frequent lessons with the counselor in the classroom, meeting with the students as needed, and also working with this teacher and students to build a community. Maybe they can do morning meetings, classroom yoga. Maybe we need to reach out to the PE teacher on that. But we need to start to build up some positive relationships in that classroom. The other thing is Mrs. Horton definitely needs to be on a plan of improvement. Like I said before, there need to be some disciplinary actions, but there's a lot of unprofessionalism that's happening with her, and there needs to be clearly outlined expectations for positive parent communication, positive communication with students, and it also, I feel like this plan of improvement needs to be very rigid. If there's anything where she sets out of line or it's observed that she goes off on a student, like that's it. I really feel like at that point, again, I would need to consult with HR, but she probably needs to be reassigned because it is not safe for her kids. I also want to make sure that Mrs. Horton realizes that I know she's been a wonderful teacher up to this point, and I know she's going through some things that no one should have to go through. But again, our ultimate concern is our students, so I will have specific expectations for her. Maybe she just needs that eye-opening sit down with me, so I can show her that I am here to support her, and will do whatever I can to make sure that we have a safe and positive and caring learning environment for her students. Last year, this probably would have surprised me if I read this case study, but unfortunately we've had a situation like this in the district, and it hurts my teacher's heart that these situations happen for our students. So I'm going to debrief the problem next. I'm extremely saddened by Mrs. Horton's behavior and attitude, and that it's changed so drastically, but we're all human. She's going through some of her own trauma, and unfortunately she needs a little more self-care before she can be concerned about the students. I'm absolutely shocked at her reaction to Mr. Stafford. I could not imagine experiencing that as an educator in the classroom. Her behavior was extremely unprofessional on many levels, but then I'm curious too, and this goes to another what I need to know is how much prep time did I give her before the parent came in? Because if I told her that morning that, hey, he's coming in and talking about Julia's placement, that's a shame on me if she doesn't know all the details about the other parent complaints. But still, it's a shocking situation. I can't believe it happened. I am also extremely hopeful. I feel like the fact that she has been a wonderful teacher up to this point, she may just need that reminder or the wake-up call that maybe it is time for her to take a leave for a while to take care of herself before she can teach her students. I know she's going through trauma, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure she feels safe. As weird as it sounds, I value the emotional drain of divorce. My parents divorced when I was young. I still see the effects of it on my mom every once in a while, and I realize how much of a toll it can take on a person. I also value the collaboration. I'm going to reach out to the head of HR. I'm going to reach out to the superintendent. I'm going to work with Mrs. Horton to work through this issue. I value her input on the plan. Again, she's a professional. She's done a great job up until this point. So we'll work together to outline what should the parent communication look like, what should her interactions look like in the classroom. And I'm valuing the professionalism as well. She's going through a tough situation, and that's terrible. But in the same vein, we are here for the students, and we have a job to do. So we have to maintain our professionalism in this situation. In my mind, the unresolved issues would be whatever happened with the other parent complaints. I mean, some parents contacted the board. The superintendent was aware of it. What happened? What's going to happen with Julia's placement? Again, I don't want to act without talking to the superintendent about that one. And I'm curious, we don't know what happened with Mr. Stafford after that outburst. Going into category 5, a reflection on the standard. I'm going to go into each of these areas in more depth, but I am going to set some clear expectations for communication. I feel like empathetic listening to Mrs. Horton is very important as well. There's support for Mrs. Horton as well as for her students, and we are concerned about the safety of her students. We can tell that the principal is promoting academic success in this situation. We have a new reading program to improve the reading of our learners. There will be an expectation of communication for parents to make sure that they are well informed with what's happening in the classroom. And we have good attendance and good test scores, so things are looking good for this school. As well as promoting professional or personal well-being, the parents are going to be met with so that their concerns are heard. We're going to meet with the students to make sure they know that they have an outlet if anything happens in the classroom and they are protected. The counselor is going to have a larger presence in the classroom to start to build that positive classroom community where students feel safe. I still believe that we will be able to enhance the instructional capacity of Mrs. Horton after talking with her. Again, we'll put that plan in place, and if she is unable to uphold it, then there will be other consequences. But I'm there to offer support because I know she can do it, and the council will be there as well to help her start to repair some of those relationships with the students. Thank you so much.